All right then. Hello, willkommen, bienvenue, konnichiwa. It's time for another Army's Inquisition, episode 403 on Sunday, the 14th of December, 2025. I'm Phil.
I am Ben.
And I am Matt.
And tonight we're very happy to be joined by the author of...
Oh, jeez.
I just pulled something. The Ancient Language of Sacred Sound, David Elkington. How are you doing, David?
Yeah, I'm fine, I'm glad to say. I'm shell-shocked by your wonderful opening. I love it.
Yeah.
Wow.
Hey, we spare no expense, do we? With the technology.
There was at least 10 minutes work in that video.
There wasn't there?
Yeah.
And, there's other things as well.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, what can I say? I'm mightily impressed. I mean, it's the Blue Peter idea of budgetary politics. I love it.
There was plenty of sticky back plastic.
I'll show you my Tracy Island next time you come on.
Well, actually, I was trying to get hold of some sticky back plastic to bind my book with to stop the cover from getting dirty, but they don't sell it anymore. It's really sad.
Oh. They do sell sticky back Velcro. Double-sided Velcro. Yeah, I used some just this week.
Really?
I had to fit an antique clock from a railway station, and I had to make this antique piece of electrical equipment compliant with BS 7671.
Right.
Naturally.
Yeah,
and that required the application of some sticky back Velcro.
Really?
Yeah.
There you go.
Yeah.
I might get some and actually adhere it to multiple copies of my book and leave them hanging around in notorious places,
Absolutely.
like the Great Pyramid,
Yeah.
The mystery of the Velcro book. I can see it now. It could be the latest thing, couldn't it?
And that would that be the only text in there? Isn't there no text or inscriptions inside the pyramid?
There's a couple, but they're up in the so-called relieving chambers between the blocks, and they're kind of more or less graffiti written in by the poor chaps who had to actually lug all that lot up to the top there. So, but that's about it. I mean, it's the pyramid's pretty amazing in terms of its. Well, I mean, overall as a structure. Have you been to it? Have you seen it?
No, unfortunately not yet. No.
It's one of the great experiences of life. I would recommend going there because just standing in front of the thing and looking up at it makes you really gawp in wonder at how on earth it was so perfectly cardinally oriented and how on earth it was put together. It's an astonishing thing.
Have you been following this Italian team that's been using this weird satellite scanning technology to look beneath the pyramids?
That's right. Yeah. I was actually on Jay Anderson's show a couple of months back, and we were talking a bit about that. And I said it's interesting because if you look at later classical civilization, you'll find that the idea of the temple portico is actually a kind of elongated pyramid atop 8 pillars, okay, which is precisely what they found on the pyramid plateau. And I've said they should look into that because it strikes me that the whole classical facade business could actually be a memorial of something that came a lot before. Now, I mean, obviously we don't know how likely that this really is going to be something architectural because it doesn't seem terribly feasible given the depth.
Yeah.
But, that's not to say it doesn't exist. I mean, the problem is we've become so conditioned to believing the history we've been almost force-fed through books and official excavations that when something new comes and shifts us away from that paradigm, it seems all the more shocking. You know, my resonance work, for instance, it's taken a long time for people to begin to accept that there's something to it, because it's breaking your conditioning. You know, it's really, it's strange how we think we like to explore and accept new ideas, but when they're challenging, it takes a long time. You know, it's weird.
It's an old saying, isn't there? Is it that archaeology proceeds with the death of each generation or something like that?
Yeah, actually, yeah, we've just quoted Max Planck at a recent press conference and said that an idea never gets accepted by its peers. It gets accepted one funeral at a time. You know, and that is very true. I hope it's not true in my case, but you know, we'll see. You know, perhaps as I sort of lowering the coffin, my hands will come out of the lid, and I'll shout, "I've got it! I've got it! Eureka! I've got it!" You know, but we'll see. You know, but,
well, speaking of research that is hard to break through the mainstream, maybe you could tell us a little about this project that you've been working on, the Jordan Lead Codices, briefly.
Yeah, about 18 years ago, my then partner, and I we came across this discovery that had been made initially by Jordanian and Israeli Bedouin, and we were put in touch with them, and eventually we found our way into the valley itself, and basically it comprises, what can I say? It's a massive site in northern Jordan, not far from the Sea of Galilee. It is absolutely huge. I mean, it's like being in an Indiana Jones film. I know that sounds really exaggerated, but you can't exaggerate the beauty of this place. You're traveling across the desert from Amman up to the north, and suddenly you begin to descend, and there are these extraordinarily deep valleys or gorges. And in them, you know, in between the cracks, they're very lush, they're very water-fed, you know, in contrast to the desert high above. And in one of them, there is this extraordinary cave system that is like, it is like an underground city, exactly as the Israeli Bedouin described them. And in them, we found these, the first books ever made, called Codices, which is the plural of the word codex, which is the earliest known form of the book, which is basically a series of metal plates that have been bound together crudely with equally impure lead wire. And in some cases, these books are actually come in solid gold, believe it or not. And they are extremely beautiful, but it also turns out from the past 18 years of working with various eminent academics, they are actually the earliest known Christian documents. And they are so old, they predate the letters of Paul, which up until recently were said to be the oldest Christian documents. These documents date to the very point at which the Essenes were actually turning into the first Christians. And furthermore, we have on one of the books the very first image of Jesus Christ. It's a very small book and it's very spectacular, to put it mildly. But we've just spent, we actually went live on the BBC at the end of March 2011 to announce this find to the world, having had it verified to a certain degree by metallurgical laboratories based at Oxford, Cambridge, and elsewhere. We had enough to be confident to know that these must be the real McCoy. And then, of course, there was a backlash. We were accused of faking these things up ourselves, and so on and so forth. So we actually have had to spend the past 14 years working with the universities of Surrey, Vienna, Glasgow, and a few other organizations to look at these things on an atomic level to demonstrate that, in fact, they are not of modern manufacture. And we released a peer-reviewed paper a couple of weeks ago. It's the first peer-reviewed paper written on the state of the metal. And we did a press conference inside the Houses of Parliament on the 21st of November that actually not only stated that the analysis says that they are not modern, it states they're well over 200 years old. That's as far as the analysis can go on this level, but we're now looking at helium analysis of the samples of metal, which can give us a very specific date. But that technology, we're still in the process of actually developing and also developing the technique. But, and this is the biggest point, one of the world's top experts on corrosion was there to give his presentation, and he stated very explicitly that such was the state of the lead, nothing like it has been seen across the face of the planet. And he said the corrosion marks on these things, where holes have developed in some of the books, he said that is to do with the impurities gradually working their way through the matrix of the metal over centuries. And we're talking here about, not 2 or 3 centuries, but many, many centuries. They've gradually formed pimples on the face of the metal, and then they've just, as they've crystallized, they've fallen out. He said that's a process that takes 1,800 to 2,000 years. Hey presto, we have proven these things are ancient. And so now the boot is on the other. Sorry, the shoe is on the other foot.
I'm familiar with. I think it was in the Dead Sea Scroll finds. There was a famous copper scroll. I don't know if it was Dead Sea Scrolls. Is there any other precedent for scrolls or codexes being made out of lead?
Yeah, we found some lead scrolls in the collection. They're very tiny. But there are not very many of them. That's the strange thing. And that kind of speaks for the overlap of the people making them, Essenes, who were obviously, some of them were from a Jewish background. And obviously what we have here is the overlap between the use of the form of the scroll into what is now the new form of the book. Now, interestingly enough, I must make this differentiation. In the famous book of Revelation, there is a small book that Jesus actually opens when seated on the throne of God that has 7 seals. I believe that we have that book in the collection. Furthermore, the word used in the original Greek in Revelation is biblioridion. Quite often, modern biblical scholars and translators will translate that as scroll. So in other words, a 7-sealed scroll. It is totally inaccurate to use that translation. We are talking here about a biblioridion, which means in Greek, a small book, and nothing but a book. So as you can imagine, this is a fairly controversial discovery, but it's been made controversial by those who are in denial over it. And, I guess we're just going to have to wait for a couple of funerals to take place.
So, David, you mentioned the pushback back in 2011, and then just then the people who are in denial of it. I'm assuming this is mainly from religious sources rather than scientific?
Not many on the science, but certainly from other sources, and not just religious. So we're kind of, we're looking into all of that at the moment. And as I say, we're just getting on with the work of now translating them and also doing more analysis and raising money for further analysis into the helium technique, because as they're made of lead has got a very low melting point. So these would have been easy to actually create in the conditions that you see in northern Jordan. But they've been accused of being fakes, but nobody's actually thought of what they're saying, because you can't fake the patinas and the corrosion that's on the things. They've accused me of faking them, which is giving me a degree of expertise that I simply don't have, And it's in a sense, I think it's kind of academic shock in a way. But you know, to get a bit technical about it, the lead itself is former uranium. Okay, so what you've got with lead is uranium that's deradiated. Okay, but you've still got obviously a bit of radiation in the lead. Okay, so if you actually do alpha tests of the samples, and you get, you know, you fire beams of alpha beams at these ion beams at these pieces of metal, alpha particles will emit if these things are actually modern. And we did get that on the surface of a book we brought back with us from Jordan initially. But then we thought a couple of years later to actually unseal it and open it. And when the same tests were done, there was no radioactivity at all. And so we realized that the books being in situ in the cavern had been washed over time and time again with rain water from the outside in the valley. And basically, you can see limescale marks on the covers of these books and all the way down the spines. But basically, the rainwater would have contained radon gas or radioactive polonium. So that's what's given it the outside this radioactive signature. When we opened it, there was no radiation. It was like a scene of jubilation. We finally realized we could prove that these things were definitely not modern forgeries. And it means that I personally am vindicated from the accusations of having forged these things. Not that anybody's yet begun to apologize, but we'll come round to that, you know.
I'm interested in the sort of historical context, David. You mentioned the Essenes before. Maybe you could tell us a bit about, you know, this time, what was happening at this time, why the Essenes would be going to the east and maybe possibly hiding this stuff.
It's a good question. I mean, it's one that I'm confronting at the moment in my work, and I've got some answers to it, but I can't say over much at the present time. But what I can say is that if you read the New Testament, there are various groups of Jewish believers who we're very familiar with, Sadducees and Pharisees. Okay. But the one group who specifically and tellingly are not mentioned anywhere, except with hints and you know, broad clues, are the Essenes. And it's fairly obvious that they were a kind of a proto-Christian monastic type group. But the problem is today we think of the Essenes purely as the community at Qumran by the Dead Sea, who were said to have created the Dead Sea Scrolls. Modern research is now showing that that's probably not quite right. There were Essenes all over Palestine, okay? And there were obviously different communities of them. And a recent work by a very good scholar called Gabriele Boccaccini, it suggests that the Qumran branch were a more hard-line branch of Essenes, who may actually not have created the scrolls. They had merely secreted them away, perhaps, or in fact, they may well have come from central Jerusalem and been hidden in the caves near the Dead Sea. You know, once we had the Roman incursions after the Jewish revolt in 66 AD. So the Essenes, also known as Nazareans, are a very mysterious, enigmatic group. And we mustn't forget here that in the original translation of John's Gospel, Jesus, when he is crucified, has a titulus placed above his head, which states that he was the Nazarean. So in other words, he was the head of the group. And if you put two and two together and realize that we may well have discovered a library of this community, you can see that what we've got here is a pretty interesting discovery. So, you know, it's ongoing work. It's a work in progress, and I would be very happy to come back and discuss it in greater detail at a later stage. Because as you can imagine, with my previous book on the acoustics of the sacred sites, etc., specifically focusing upon cathedrals and churches and things like that, suddenly I've got a dovetail between my acoustics work and my work on the codices. And that's creating significant interest and also significant problems.
When was it published, the ancient language? Was it 2023?
Actually, let me have a look at the title page. Do you know, I even keep forgetting the title of the thing, to be honest with you. Oh, yeah, 2021, 4 years ago.
All right.
Yeah. So I'm thinking of updating it even further with the latest research and things, because it's quite curious. You know, sound is suddenly getting out there. The whole idea of sound in ancient architecture is suddenly beginning to make some headlines. I'm really glad to say. But what nobody's talking about is the effect of sound between the sacred site and us. You know, and I think if there's going to be another industrial revolution, I don't think it's going to be AI. I just think it's going to be I, in terms of consciousness. You know, I mean, I don't know why people are talking about artificial intelligence, because surely that's what's ruling the world at the moment. But there we go.
What was it? The famous Tesla quote: "If you want to understand the mysteries of the universe, think in terms of frequency and resonance," something like that, I think he said.
That's right. I mean, you know, as I stated in the book here, the very opening of John's Gospel, you know, in the beginning was the Word was with God, the Word was God. And then, of course, you look at the word God in its original Latin, going all the way back to Sanskrit, it's guth, meaning voice. It's quite extraordinary stuff. And of course, we go into cathedrals, they're very, very resonant. And I mean, you know, with Christmas next week, we go to cathedrals and we listen to carols, and they're beautiful. I mean, I love the medieval carols. I think they're gorgeous. But what people don't give credit to for is the cathedrals themselves, and the way in which those words really do hit. They hit hard, particularly when you're, you know, at a celebration of a ritual like that at the given time of the year. You know, when we're now in deep midwinter, we're coming up for the shortest day, going to be the victory of light over darkness very shortly. And we of course have that fabulous tale of the fragile child sat on the lap of the strong woman, you know, both of whom are in danger from unknown forces. It's a classic tale of the human condition, isn't it?
I remember reading somewhere about, I think it might have been during the Crusader period, when the Crusaders took Jerusalem, and them celebrating the Pentecost, I guess at the would it be the Church of the Holy Sepulchre maybe at the time?
That's it, would have been, yeah.
And the way the people reacted, they were overcome. It was like a pure form of ecstasy that we just don't have in our Sunday services anymore, do we?
Well, I mean, I've got to be honest with you. I find it really depressing going to modern services now, because, you know, churches and cathedrals were engineered for the human voice. They were engineered for its resonance, engineered for its rhythm, and so on and so forth. And I went to a church service a couple of years ago, and I've not been since, where the vicar appeared with a Bluetooth. It's like sort of, oh my God, you know, here we are in this beautiful medieval church, and the feedback was just simply staggering. And it's like sort of, you don't have to go to these efforts to try and be modern. People don't go to church for that reason. They're going to try and root themselves in the past, where this stuff was said to have happened in myth. This is what people want. They want the connection. So why are you using modern electronics in a place where the feedback is so awful that actually it just leaves you stone cold? You know?
Sterile atmosphere. I mean,
I was at a service at Wells Cathedral about, 15, 16 years ago. And, you know, Wells Cathedral is a masterpiece of the Gothic art. It's wonderful. And I went because I really wanted to appreciate the superb resonance of this place and its effect upon me personally, where I had my original experience that got me writing this work, you know, 40 odd years ago. Anyway, I think it's when the church organ, the cathedral organ, broke out into sleigh ride that I couldn't stop laughing, and they just asked me to leave. They wouldn't give me my money back, but I just thought, oh, this is just ridiculous, because it's a modern, okay, it's a 50s, 60s Hollywood tune, but in a Gothic cathedral, I mean, at Christmas time,
Yeah,
I mean, if they'd have had AC/DC playing Keep the Thrill, I'd have been more respectful,
what I was thinking there is it makes me think about, well, the church that I've been to most recently, I think it was built in the 50s from memory, but it does have like a some kind of audio system in it. As far as I can remember, I've probably been going there since the 80s. Yep. Probably say, and I can always remember it having some kind of speaker system, something like that. But what I was thinking about, like the medieval churches, then would there have been any kind of instrumentation at all, or would it have just been, the priest, I guess, or leading some kind of chant? Would there have been hymns and things like that? I don't know if
yes, there would have been hymns, there would have been chants, there would have been the occasional bit of instrumentation to lead the singing. But let's not just, think about Christianity in the medieval period. If you go to Egypt and you go all over the Southern Europe, etc., and you look at classical civilization, you see a pile of ruins. And people walk along around Egypt and they think, oh gosh, they were really obsessed with death. No, they weren't obsessed with death. I think anybody looking 2,000 years into the future back at our civilization would say we are obsessed with death, But what they will not be able to hear, as we can't hear it in the past, is the music and song, because these temples were places of music and chant. People were singing 24/7. It was to raise the vibration of these places for whatever reason they believed, that seemed somehow to, in their eyes, purify these places. So we're not talking here about places that were dead and were silent. They were never silent. So you come forward to the medieval period, it's the continuation of a very, very ancient tradition. And that's what makes it all the more absurd that you have sleigh ride in Wells Cathedral in the 21st century, because we've kind of really sadly, we've just dished our traditions. And in the dishing of them, we've actually broken people's sense of faith, their sense of belonging, their sense of being, connected to planet Earth. It's really sad. And I just think it's grievous. It really is very, very grievous indeed. Because it doesn't matter if you believe or not, but there's a science here. This whole thing's to do with science. The science of our evolution from our planet. And we are still linked to it via this 8 hertz vibration we have, linking our brains to the Earth's own resonance, and we can't get away from that yet. We haven't yet evolved enough to say that we are now independent, but we've got the arrogance to do so culturally. And I find it vastly amusing, but I also find it vastly disappointing too.
Yeah, that would be the Schumann resonance you're talking about there.
Absolutely.
7.9 hertz, whatever it is.
Yeah.
What's the earliest evidence you've found of an understanding between how a structure is constructed and in a way to harness sound, energy, however you characterize it?
Oh, you can go all the way back to 8,000 BC easily. It's the first inclination of humanity in constructing the sacred site is to, I don't know, it's like we emerge from the caves, or, we come down from the trees or whatever, or wherever we came from. And do we actually want to sort of set up shopping centers or schools or libraries? No. The very first thing we do is to build the sacred site. And so, of course, when you think about the connections between us and those places in terms of where they're located, they're geolocated, generally over places of power where you can feel the numinosity rising from out of the ground. Thanks to the like blind springs, etc., giving off an electrical charge, affected by the rays of the sun at particular times of the year. And of course, then these places were chanted at and in. It was a community thing. We feel this very deep sense of vision and purpose when we use these places properly. You can understand why people felt that they were places of immense sanctity. We had to build them because we were staying in contact with Mother Earth. And not to do so, we would have been lost without that. That's why in my book, I take the thesis a lot further and say that it's thanks to resonance at these places that we ended up with the means of communication between, societies, between people, in terms of writing, in terms of script. At first, it was hieroglyphic in nature, and we showed at the experiments at the Great Pyramid in the late 90s that if you fire the internal resonance of various aspects of the pyramid interior at a membrane coating the sarcophagus inside the king's chamber, sand scattered across that surface will, in response to the sound waves at those frequencies, take hieroglyphic form.
Wow, that's mental.
That is crazy.
That's bananas.
Yeah. It's just extraordinary. It really is extraordinary.
Sorry, David, which specific hieroglyphs?
The one that says, "Can you turn it down a bit?"
Yeah. Yeah, I can see it now. It's like we got the hieroglyphic equivalent of a health and safety notice. But no, what we got was the hieroglyph for the god Ra, which is a circle with a dot in it.
Wow.
We got the Nemesh crown of the pharaoh, which is that blue and striped crown, blue and gold striped crown you get on the mummy mask of Tutankhamun. We had the backbone of Osiris called the Jed pillar, which is another hieroglyph. But more tellingly and more extraordinarily, we got the double eye of Horus, which is very, very rare. In fact, in Egyptian times, to portray that to the outside world for all and sundry to see was punishable by death, because you're talking about the secret holy name of the Egyptian god. And it's called the Nebo-Jer, okay? And oddly enough, when I came back with that photograph of it from to see Professor Christine El-Mahdi, she more or less fainted. She said, "This is quite the most remarkable thing." She said, "This is the secret holy name of God. This is the holy grail of Egyptian hieroglyphs." So we were completely stunned by that. And I mean, the experiments themselves weren't. They were unique in that sense, but they were not unique when we went to other places. In Celtic zones like Ireland and parts of Western Britain, we'd end up with Celtic knotwork patterns in linguistic form again. In Indian temples, we'd end up with the Om.
Is that using the same frequencies, David?
Using the frequencies of the specific places that were constructed.
Okay, yeah.
The locations, yeah. And I don't know if you know it, but the Pyramid of the Sun and Moon at Teotihuacan in Central America was actually built to resonate to the cry of the Quetzal.
Yes, I've seen a video about that, I think.
Yeah, and of course the great god of the Central Americans was Quetzalcoatl, okay, the feathered serpent. And the sun will, at specific times of the year, actually appear in such a way that, allied to the cry of the Quetzal, you will see a serpent literally climbing the steps of the pyramid. Mm-hmm. So, again, we had the same linguistic tendencies at those places too. So what you've got is, in a sense, you've got the manifestation of the word being given to humanity via the gods. Now, how you interpret the word gods is entirely up to you. But ancient humanity thought this was miraculous. They were being told by the gods how to communicate and thus how to commune. So the whole idea coming forward of Jesus being called the Word, as were certain of the Greek gods called the Word, is all about communion, because you're communing with the divine. And then, of course, I'm positing in my new book, which I'm hoping will be published this coming year, that the nature of cursive script, where cursive script was probably one of the, if not the greatest invention of human history. What I mean by that is, if you wanted to leave a note for the milkman on Mount Sinai in ancient, Egyptian times, by the time you'd carved out the hieroglyphs, which involves sonograms, ideograms, and pictograms, the milkman's been, he's left your milk, and it's turned to cheese. Okay? But suddenly, on Mount Sinai, there was this extraordinary event where somehow somebody developed this whole idea that you could link all three into a system known as the alphabet, from the name of the first two letters, alpha, beta, okay? And the alphabet was thus born in this abstract cursive form, very similar to what today's alphabet is as we write. So in other words, nothing has changed for a good 3,500 years, much, okay? So now you could write a note for the milkman and you'd have fresh milk, okay? Because it didn't take you long to whiz something off. And to these people, to actually be able to leave behind a mark that somebody could come by, a day, a week, a month, a year, a decade later and read, must have seemed miraculous. And we underestimate this. And if we want to understand the awe of these people regarding these monuments and their ability to talk to us, to give us script, we've got to get back to that sort of innocent wonder of what these people were going through. And that's the experience I had in Wells Cathedral when I first set out. I kind of felt lifted out of my body. And it was really profound. I mean, I can't tell you how profound it was. And I felt as if I'd wondered if I'd taken anything illicitly without knowing. It was just really remarkable. And to think that it seemed to go on for quite a while. And then, there I was literally seconds later, but completely changed, completely altered by the whole thing. That sense of wonder is what must have happened to ancient humanity in ages past. And it's just a shame that we've kind of lost that at the moment in this age of technology where, we like technology. I mean, look at the iPhones, look at laptops, but we don't have quite that sense of wonder as to how they work and how they're helping us, because we're now too obsessed with using them for social media, but not actually understanding that the very things we're using, the keys, were given to us by the gods in ages past. It seems sad to me, that same cutoff,
Mm.
And here we are living in a world where the environment is really in a bad way, thanks to not solely to human beings, but we could do a lot to clean up our act.
Yeah.
If we want to get back to that, we need to get back to that ancient sense of how we saw it,
Do you credit, is it the Phoenicians that are credited with the alphabet?
Yeah, we think it was Phoenician slaves working in Sinai in the turquoise and lead mines who originally came up with this whole idea of cursive script that then became known as Western or Proto-Sinaitic after the region. And then it became Phoenician, Canaanite, and Hebrew, and all the rest of it. But our own script is directly related to that, obviously.
Yeah.
So,
but it's almost as if there's a separate evolution in Egypt, because there you've got the hieroglyphs, the hieratics, then to Coptic.
You've got Demotic and then into Coptic, which is a survival of the old hieratic system, yeah. But in my book, I'm relating the whole idea of script via the resonance of these places, okay, to the hero. Because wherever you go in these places, there's a hero myth. And it involves the father god, it involves Mother Earth, and it involves the hero, who is the child of both. and it's the hero who brings script, who brings the word.
Right.
Okay, this is one aspect of resonance that's ignored largely, but they were built, these places, specifically for the hero. And the word hero, by the way, is one of the few remaining words from ancient Egypt to still survive in the English language. Because, of course, the word for Horus in Egypt, Horus is the Greek version of the original Greek Heru, Heru, which is virtually the same as hero. Okay, so our words, our very words we use have an archaeology. They go back, in time. And if you go get yourselves an English dictionary and just look up the origins of these words, it's the most remarkable thing. I met an atheist a couple of years ago, and I asked him how he would describe his atheism. He said, he was enthusiastic. And I said, gotcha. And he said, what do you mean? I said, well, if you look at the etymology of the word enthusiastic, it comes from the Latin entheos, in God. You can't get away from it,
Yeah.
And I mean, it's just wonderful. I think it's really great. The gods still survive, but unfortunately, they become trapped in dogma and doctrine, and it's still as if the priesthood is wanting us to remain ignorant for the purpose of control. And I think it's very sad because Christianity is a much needed quotient in our society. It's created our history. It's created the society we now live in. And I think we need to get back in touch with the basics of it, if you know what I mean.
Yeah, we're in this, with the story of humanity is this, we seem to have been in this trap where like a power struggle. And there are people who always want power, and religion has been one of those structures that's been used to suppress people, to control people, to tax people. And often the sort of the meaning gets lost along the way, and these people put themselves between the rest of us and God, in a way. You'll only find God through me, sort of thing.
Yeah, I have a one-liner for that. I think that religion is the enema of the masses. But if people ask me, "Are you religious?" I say, "No, I'm not religious at all. I no longer have a religious filament in my body, but I am a deeply spiritual person because of the experiences I've had. And spirituality is a very personal thing. Obviously, I'm going to be called wishy-washy on that, but it's a personal issue, and I don't see why." I have to go around promoting it, extolling it, proselytizing. It's a personal thing. And I think anybody who goes to these beautiful places, including cathedrals, and has that kind of experience, I think the priesthood should be there to guide you on the path. I think that's, a very fair thing. But I think that in terms of dogma and doctrine, forget it,
Where are the best places in the northwest of England to go?
Gosh, there are so many, actually. You've got so many cathedrals about up there. I can recommend Nottinghamshire, Southwell Minster. I can recommend Lincoln Cathedral, which is simply stunning. You get the chance to get there. You've got smaller cathedrals the further north you go, because, of course, I dare say that there were climatic reasons for that, but there are quite a few places. I would have a good look at some of your Gothic cathedrals. As you've got a Stafford Cathedral, Lichfield Cathedral is really stunning as well. But we did some experiments at Newcastle Cathedral and Manchester, but they're not really. To be honest with you, they're not as dramatic as the larger Gothic cathedrals, I have to say. They're very small. But, you make up for it in some of your stone circles up there. And going further north, of course, Callanish. Just very, very stunning places, actually. You
can't walk down the street without tripping over a megalith around here.
You can't.
No.
They're absolutely everywhere.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's wonderful. That's really wonderful. I love those sites, I have to say,
Where's Notre Dame up to in Paris? Because there was a fire there, wasn't there, years ago? Have they finished restoring it? Or
They have, and I recommend everybody go online and have a look at the before and after. What they've done is a really, really stunning job, I have to say.
Wow.
And I have to say, it's thanks to our king that it was restored as well as it was, because through his former Prince's Trust, all of the craftsmen who were experts in these kinds of restoration jobs, and they had all of the old skills that had been preserved. They got called over to France to take part in the build, and my God, it's an astonishing story. I mean, they went in, some of these experts, and they looked at some of the beams, the roof beams high up in the nave, and they could see the actual carpenter's original marks from the medieval period. And from those, they were actually able to make the original tools, which then to recarve out more beams. I mean, this is extraordinary stuff. This is really quite a story.
Nice.
And if you look at Notre Dame as it was 10 years ago, obviously it had become kind of old and decrepit, was very dark and filthy, of course. But now the stonework's been cleaned, it's been, given a real good spring clean all the way through. It's absolutely stunning. I mean, I really do recommend having a look at it. It's just a wonderful, wonderful thing to have done. And I think it's given us quite a bit of an insight into how these places were originally constructed as well, which I think is really valuable,
Mm. Have you seen the research looking at the other cathedrals, the other, what would you say, St. Mary cathedrals in France, that they could be linked to the constellation of Virgo in the sky?
I think there's a lot in that, I have to be honest with you. I think there's a huge amount in that. I've discovered myself further constellations within cathedral patterns too. And I'm actually investigating that for a second volume on my books about the codices, because there's some really interesting and important information there. And that's what's so curious, is that these extraordinary buildings are actually preserving knowledge from the deep and ancient past. And I think it's stuff that was done kind of in spite of the medieval church, rather than because of the medieval church. There's a big story there. And as I say, when the time comes, I'd be very happy to spill the beans, all 57 varieties.
Well, Chartres Cathedral has lots of weird iconography in it, doesn't it? Sort of what would be seen as maybe heretical at the time.
Well, I've come to the conclusion, with having sort of investigated the Bible and the old writings, particularly now we're translating the codices, and I've got a funny feeling that what today we call Christianity is actually a heresy of Gnosticism, because Gnosticism was the original Christianity. And I think largely what's been preserved in our cathedrals is a preservation of all of those older pieces of knowledge that were in danger of actually dying out. And the great thing about Chartres, I've got a photograph on the central plate section in my book of the tympanum at Chartres, okay, which is the pyramid aspect over the entrance, and in it you see Christ enthroned in a standing wave pattern. Okay, it's what they call a mandorla, okay, which means almond in Latin, but it's actually a Vesca Pisces. Okay, now I have to say it's very similar to the feminine anatomy in certain parts, although we won't go down that part. But however, you could say he is being born anew as the Word, because that Vesca Pisces is a standing waveform, which is the optimum resonance of Chartres Cathedral. So he's being born as the Word of God. I mean, this is astonishing stuff. And we pay little attention to it. And these tympana, okay, occur all over Europe. Now, the word tympanum means drum skin, okay? Skin of a drum, which of course gives you resonance, okay? So again, we've got preservation of an older, mystical theology here. It's very interesting, So people who are new to Gothic cathedrals in the late 1200s, early 1300s, these were largely uneducated people. They were then going into these places for services, and they saw these extraordinary scenes they'd never seen before. They saw these wonderful constructions, these pillars, the ornate work, stonework on the interior, this huge level of light being let in through these beautifully colored stained windows that themselves were telling stories. And St. Bernard of Clairvaux called them books in stone, which is what they were. So people were coming out affected by the profundity of the resonance inside, affected as I was by a new impetus. And then less than a century and a half later, we end up with, the Renaissance, the Enlightenment, the Age of Reason. We give ourselves the credit for it, but we don't give the credit to the places that actually began to change the way people were thinking. And that's where I think the church did us an enormous favor. It rescued human civilization in Europe from the internecine warfare, of the Dark Ages, and gave us a new focus. And the tragedy of the church was that it still tried to maintain control of that focus well beyond its sell-by date. And that's the great tragedy of Christianity. And, going back to the codices offer a renewal of this, a renewal of purpose. But, we need to get back to the sacred site. We need to get back to an understanding of utilizing these places properly and having a renewed idea of Christianity that reaches out both to paganism and to the other Abrahamic faiths. And I believe that there's enough evidence now to affirm that and to hopefully walk along that pathway. Let's see what happens.
As far as this sort of knowledge or skill of being able to construct these monuments to harness these frequencies, how do you think it was transmitted over centuries and millennia?
That's a really good question. It's one I can only partially answer. I mean, we actually, scientists did some tests on the red parts of the stained glass in Chartres, all years ago. I can't give you a specific date, but certainly in the 70s or 80s. And it was found that it actually took the UV out of sunlight as it passed through the pane, and therefore made the light a lot less intense, and therefore it had this great ability to enhance the interior of the cathedral even further. The problem is we can't make that pigment today to create that same effect. It's a bit like the blue, intense ultramarine blue wash you get in certain Mayan temples. When actually investigated under a microscope, the pigment had been crushed from lapis lazuli crystals to such a fineness that it goes even beyond modern industrial processes.
It makes me think of the purple dye. Where they used to, Tyrian purple, where they used to crush the mollusks, incredibly labor-intensive process.
Yeah, from the murex shell, oddly enough, and again, extraordinary. How on earth did they do it,
Some of that was found, I believe, at Bath Cathedral as well. There
was some, recently. Absolutely. Yeah, and of course the word Phoenician gives us the word phoenix, and of course Phoenician means purple.
Wow.
And of course, if you then think about the last surviving aspect of Phoenicia in Europe, you end up with Venice. Venice is another form of Phoenicia, because the PH of Phoenicia becomes a V in Western European languages.
Wow, how did that happen? I think of Phoenicia like Cadiz, Carthage, like these sort of merchant ports that were the enemy of Rome historically. So how does a massive city in Italy get called Venice? Phoenicia?
I suspect that traders there just kept very quiet, kept it secret, gradually, they built up their trading links, and it may well be that the Romans themselves were very, very reliant upon them for their sources of the murex dye, which the Phoenicians were very, very cagey about giving away. So Rome didn't have it all her way, We have stories of Phoenician boats coming to Britain in the early Roman period. And if they were followed by Roman boats seeking to find the trade routes to Britain, they would purposely sink themselves. And, in regard to that, that sounds extreme, but in regard to that, the motivation was that the Phoenicians had a system of insurance that if they made it back home, they would be recompensed for the price of the boat. It makes good commercial sense. The Phoenicians were all over Europe. They were definitely in the Cornish waters of the UK in around about 1500 BC. That we do know, and it's very likely they were elsewhere too. The problem with modern thinking is that we have to see history as a progression to where we are now, and I don't think history works like that.
Nope.
Yes, instead of going as a straight line going forward or ahead, it's just more like a spring, and we kind of match the spiral below us and above us, in historical terms. But of course, in physics, there's no such thing as a straight line either. So that shows you the unreality of our thinking.
Peaks and troughs of progression. It does feel like we're in a trough at the moment, I'd say, David.
Yeah, but I think it's exciting. History is like a compost heap. You build it up, it's full of rot, it sinks and collapses, at which point it becomes fertile. That's when you lay it on the ground to get new growth. And we're at the point now of collapse again. And I think it's great. I think history is the stick of events.
We're just enjoying wallowing in the manure.
Yeah, just for a bit longer.
Yeah. I really do think that. I mean, we think we're so superior, but we're not. We're a part of nature, and we're in that scenario now where I don't know about you guys, but I kind of feel that our culture at the moment is really moribund. I'm not a lover of modern music, but by any definition, you've got to admit it's really bad at the moment. Painting and art is really not much to go by, and the films, they just keep remaking the same old stuff,
Yeah.
And you kind of get this sense that it's become all too corporate, and that actually you can always feel that bubbling below the surface, there's something about to break. And I think that's exactly what's going to happen. I think we're at the beginning of a real starburst of a new cultural breakthrough. It's going to lead to a phenomenal change. The problem is at the moment, the accountants are in charge, the bureaucrats are in charge, and whilst they're in charge, you don't stand a chance,
No.
So, we just have to grin and bear it for the moment, but it won't last long,
Well,
that's good.
I think that's an optimistic note to finish on, isn't it?
I think so too, yeah.
Future is bright.
Yes, it is.
It might get a bit sticky,
Yeah.
but
We'll make it through.
We might all rot, but then grow into something new.
Yes.
Yeah.
Renewal.
When I reappear in a future life, I shall say I'm just well spread.
Exactly.
What's Keir Starmer saying? National renewal.
Oh, right. Yes.
Big.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I trust him.
Yeah.
I think you're labouring a point.
Well, David, is there anything you want to leave us with before we go, or shall we sign off? Because we're just rocking up to an hour now.
Yeah, I would just say to everybody to go onto our website regarding the discovery of the Jordan Lead Codices. It's theleadcodices.com. That's Codices, CODICES.com, or newmansociety.org. And Newman is NUMEN, society.org. That we are going to be launching the film footage of the presentation in Parliament over the coming weeks. and there will be some really dynamic stuff on it. So do have a look.
Wow.
When I'm further progressed in about the next month or two, get in touch. I will come on board and I'll spill the beans.
Yeah,
Excellent.
Spill them all over us.
We'll look forward to that.
Yeah,
David.
absolutely. I'll bring a tin opener.
Yeah.
Well, this has been fantastic. Thanks for
Yeah.
your time, David. Really appreciate it.
It's good to see you all, and I
Yeah.
wish you all a Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year.
Oh, you
Yes,
too,
yes.
sir.
I'm probably going to get the police now for I hate for mentioning Christmas, but
Yeah,
hey,
you have to say happy holidays, David.
yeah, I know. I'm just going to give them one of those things you put on the table for Christmas lunch and say you're all crackers, you know.
God.
But you know, I mean, yeah, I mean, you get that sense that there is something about to break through, and I don't just mean that in society's terms, but in terms of consciousness. And I believe that we're heading somewhere really phenomenal, and we have to confront the evils that are coming out, just to kind of get rid of them and be shot of them, so we can purify everything and get back on the path to do what we do best, which is to invent, to see, to observe, and to laugh our ruddy heads off.
Excellent.
Fantastic.
Yes, definitely.
Yeah, superb. Right, the Great Awakening is nigh.
It is.
That's right.
The leadcodices.com. The link is in the show notes. It's up on the screen as well. Please check out, follow David's work. And again, thanks very much, David. And we'll be in touch soon.
You're really welcome, guys. You take
All right.
good care, okay?
Yeah,
Thank
happy
you. You
Christmas.
Yeah.
Yeah, you too. Enjoy it.
Will do. Right, folks, we'll be back after a short recess in about 10 minutes.
Yeah.
Then we'll do some news. All right?
All right.
Okay.
See you then.
See you there. Bye. Bye. Bye.